You are listening to the Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast,
where we talk about fine food and healthy living throughout Asia.
So let's get started. Hey everybody, Ian and Todd here.
Welcome to the Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast.
If this is your first time listening, then thanks for coming. The Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast is produced every week for your enjoyment, and show notes are found on our Facebook page.
Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram or on my blog, toddinasia.com. That's Todd with two D's in Asia.com.
All links are in the show notes. Now, let's get started. Welcome listeners to this week's podcast. Today, Todd and I are actually speaking to each other from my backyard in the beautiful location of JB. Birds tweeting.
Yeah, you really couldn't get a nicer day in Malaysia than today.
Definitely. We're going to be talking about food, the importance of food, some of the problems that we see arising in food, some of the things that people should be aware of and they should be contemplating when you eat food. The lack of fish coming out of the South China Sea, or whether you're eating shark fin soup at a fancy restaurant, or, Todd?
Is your food that says organic really organic?
Yeah, all those things.
We've interviewed quite a few people, and we've learned a lot in the last 6 or 7 weeks that we've been doing this about what's happening here in Asia, and we're just taking sort of a time out to digest the information and then share with our listeners what's going to be on the podcast coming up over the next few weeks and months.
That's for sure, because not everything that you see on a menu is really what it is.
Yeah.
And that's what we've discovered.
And Ian, you as a supplier, you're running up against some unfair competition when it comes to some mass suppliers of fish and seafood. You're a local, sustainable supplier. Yes, your product does travel from Australia to Singapore, but everything travels from everywhere to Singapore. And you are, as part of an Australian sustainable farm who incurs all the costs of that sustainability, competing against huge companies. And maybe you can share just a little bit about what you found with some of the companies that you're coming up against.
I won't actually mention any particular names of companies, but like you said, it's crazy. The Australia, like I spent 20 years in Australia, and our food standards are right up there. As people would know, when you travel into Australia, you have to declare everything, every food, every seed, everything, because they're really sensitive about what comes into the country and what we eat. We're very sensitive to that, and we're also sensitive to what we export out. So when we export food, we get checked by government agencies whenever we're exporting. So they make sure that we have all the stamps in place. We're not putting in growth hormones. We're not adding additives. We're not being dodgy. It is legitimate food that we're sending abroad that is clean and, for the best part, organic. I was being tested by our company back in Australia, Campanati Yabbies, is tested every year for growth hormones, antibiotics, all that sort of stuff. So when you buy Australian produce, you know it's the best. It's clean and everything like that. But like I said, and like we've discovered, some of the stuff that's coming into Singapore, Asia, it's not real food. It's a joke.
What are some examples of what you're saying is not real food?
I went to one with a colleague recently. Well, it was just the end of last year, and we spoke about getting yabbies on the menu, all that sort of stuff, and they said, well, for you to be able to supply us, you have to go through a sustainability checklist. So you have to tick all the right dots and all that sort of stuff. So it can take up to 3 to 6 months. And I said, look, fine, if I get the time, it's a bit hard when you're a small business, but if you get the time, I'll go and do that.
Where do those sustainability, who does that check? Is someone from Singapore or on the Australian side?
No. It's not governmental. This is the irony. It's checked. The checklist is on the actual multinational company that's subscribing to it.
So the company fills out a form that says, yes, we're sustainable.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's only a limited amount of companies that can supply that big multinational at any one time. But the irony comes in when we're sitting down with these people. My colleague turned around to the business people, the people in charge, and they said, well, what happens when there's a Chinese banquet wedding and they want shark fin soup? And you know what they said?
What did they say?
They said, well, we just give it to them. So in other words, sustainability, all that credibility is absolute falsehood.
Wow.
I'd love to swear right now, but I'm not going to.
So money talks, in other words.
Yeah, money talks and BS walks, as they say. So,
is that what they say in Australia?
Yeah.
I think they say that in America too.
Yeah. So, there's so much sustainability, but it's not always true.
So now that's real shark fin that they're serving up?
Yeah, shark fin soup.
Wow.
It's a high commodity. The sad part is for shark fin soup, for those that don't know, when you get shark fin soup, when they catch it, fishermen catch it, they'll catch the sharks, they'll cut off the fins, and then they'll throw the shark overboard because there's no money to be made in the flesh. So the poor shark, it's still alive, goes to the bottom of the ocean, and it can't even swim. And if you know anything about sharks, for them to breathe, they actually have to swim. They have to swim forward. Yeah, they have to keep moving, exactly.
Oh, that is so sad.
It's a cruel way to die. Not only do they have their fins cut off, but they're starved of oxygen at the same time. So there's a real lack of sensitivity. And not only that, but they're also, a lot of these sharks are endangered species.
Yeah, well, of course. Now, even more so after shark fin soup at the Chinese wedding banquet. So, not only, of course, are the sharks being affected, but the whole ecosystem, the sharks are...
they're an apex predator.
Right.
Yeah, they're right up at the top of the food chain. So another thing that people don't realise is that the higher you go up on your food chain with fish species, the higher the mercury levels as well. So basically, the little fish, they eat, and there's a lot of mercury coming into the oceans from our human waste and all the rubbish that we filter into the ocean. The bigger fish eat the smaller fish, and then the bigger fish again eat the smaller, and so on the cycle goes. So what happens is they have this massive accumulation of mercury, and a lot of it will actually go into the tips of these fins.
Wow. Well, I would call that maybe karma.
Yeah.
If you eat shark fin, you're going to get a load of mercury.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll help. If we get that word out, maybe that'll help ordering of shark fin.
Yeah.
It's packed full of mercury. Do not eat it. Well, let's talk about overfishing for a little bit. There's one of the issues is the Chinese, especially. There's other markets too, but the Chinese are massive accumulators of fish. Tell us a little bit about how they're fishing and what they're doing in the China Sea especially.
Yeah, okay. So basically there's a lot of dispute at the moment in the South China Sea in terms of fishing territories.
And the South China Sea it runs from China down to Singapore and around Vietnam. And how far east does it go?
Correct. So it goes through to the Philippines, Indonesia, as south as Singapore.
Okay.
It's a really small area.
Yeah.
But the amazing thing is it does produce 12% of all seafood in the world. Yeah. So what's happening now is that there's a dispute in terms of ownership. The Chinese are creating artificial islands, military bases where they can fly in planes. They're really pushing their sovereignty. They're really pushing forward, and
who is the dispute with in terms of?
It's every country in that area. So there's a disputed territory that is natural fishing grounds, like for the Philippines or for Indonesia or Vietnam. There's been cases of the Filipino fishermen that have been go out to fish, and they've been threatened by the Chinese Navy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Chinese Navy pulls up and says, "You're not fishing here anymore."
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. All sorts of disturbing cases. But what's people need to be really aware of is essentially it's a raping and pillaging of those seas.
Yeah.
So because there's no boundaries or there's no enforcement on what can be caught, like in Australia, we have a legal catch limit for most of our fisheries.
Commercial or private.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So basically it limits the amount of crayfish or fish that can be caught within our nautical boundaries. So it protects the fish, protects the crayfish and everything else.
I'm liking Australia more and more.
Yeah. Well, it's I don't know. It's got its great points, and we also have some sad points as well. But having said that, there's no boundaries of what you can catch, how much you can catch. So you can get big fishing trawlers that'll go through the South China Sea, catch a huge amount of fish. They'll even have motherships. So if there is boundaries like they do in the Southern Ocean, Patagonian toothfish, for example, there's been a lot of pillaging of Patagonian toothfish, which is on the southern continent, so in Antarctica. So what will happen is that you'll get a lot of fishing vessels. They'll come down from other countries if they're coming from Europe or South America. They'll come down and they will catch their bag limit of Patagonia toothfish, and then they'll take it back to a mothership, what they call a mothership, offload it and then go back out and catch more. And the Patagonian toothfish is on the endangered list.
Yeah, almost wiped out, huh?
Yeah. And a lot of these fish species, a lot of people don't know, not just the Patagonian toothfish, but a lot of others, they have a lifespan of up to 100 years. So their breeding cycle is actually quite limited.
Yeah.
They don't breed a lot, but
they last a while.
Exactly.
If they're not completely fished out.
Yeah. So
now, what about these trawlers or super trawlers?
So the super trawlers, what happens with those? They will have a massive net, and it drags along the ground as it goes forward. And by dragging it along the ground, they catch all the fish they want, and they get what's called bycatch as well. So they get species of fish that they don't want, but they just catch it all anyway.
So they're just scooping up everything.
Everything, yeah. And what happens, it's like if you rake your fingers along the soil, in your backyard, it pulls everything towards you. So it grabs everything and it ruins coral reefs, habitats, everything. So what happens is that there's no living habitat for future fish.
Yeah. So they're sucking up all the fish they can, and then they're ruining their homes, so they can't be any new fish should there be any left over to spawn or reproduce. Wow. Exactly.
So it's some pretty crazy times that we live in.
Yeah.
I found a quote on a website. Stocks are already a fraction of what they once were. This is talking about the South China Sea, down to as little as 5% in the 1950s. So the other thing is that they're using, apart from fishing trawlers, they're also using dynamite fishing.
Dynamite fishing?
Correct. For the small fishermen, it's an easy way to catch fish. So they'll get out in their boat, they'll throw some dynamite over the side, and it'll explode.
I know the listeners can't see me, but I am slack-jawed right now.
Okay, so what happens, it explodes, and what happens, the fish, they have a float bladder that keeps them buoyant so they can go up and down the water column. So when the dynamite explodes, it pushes pressure throughout the water column. Basically, it pops that bladder that creates buoyancy or controls their buoyancy. So what happens is they float up to the surface.
They're still alive?
Yeah, correct. So then the fishermen can scoop them all up. Or if they're
this
trying
just does not seem fair.
It isn't. It's crazy. But the other thing that they do is cyanide. They use cyanide. So for the hard to reach fish, some of the ones that are in the nooks and the crannies of the coral reef, they'll go in and they'll have a little water, like a squirt bottle full of cyanide, and they'll squirt it inside the hole, whether it's a moray eel or whatever they're trying to get. They'll squirt it in there. It'll stun and kill the fish. And then they take it out and then they sell it to us.
And
as
we're
customers.
eating cyanide in the fish.
Exactly. Well, a portion of cyanide.
Portion
Hopefully
of
not too
cyanide,
much.
portion of mercury. Well, it's going to be a while before I have sushi again.
Yeah.
Man. So now you said food riots.
7-8 years ago, we had a price spike in wheat commodities throughout the world. So there was a lack of wheat in the world. For the first time in a long time, wheat prices went up. In terms of, to give you an idea, wheat is one of the most staple diets of our society.
Sure.
Whether it's in Asia
Yeah.
or Europe or whatever. Anyway, in 1980, for example, wheat was about $4.20 a bushel. And in 2015, it was about the same price.
Wow.
So if you can imagine most farmers, wheat farmers out there, while their imports have been increasing with chemicals and fertilizers and everything like that, their profit margins have been shrinking desperately.
Sure.
So
their costs aren't going down or staying stable even. They're going up. Yeah.
So there was a time when farmers stopped putting in so much wheat. There was a price spike where wheat doubled in price. And we had massive, there were food riots in a lot of third world countries because that was their main dietary consumption, because it was a cheap food that they could have. Not only that, but even in 2018, there was
this year.
Protests in Sudan.
We're running out of stuff.
Exactly.
There's how many? Almost 7.5 billion people now on the planet.
Yeah.
And we're fishing the hell out of the waters. We're growing meat as fast as we can. Wheat obviously is still a staple. What's the answer? Ian Nenke, we want answers. We want them right now.
The answer, I believe, Todd, is going back to simplicity. One of my best friends, Nick Kelly, he's trialling a new method of farming. So to wean he's weaning his farm off chemical and fertilizer use.
Wow.
He's in Western Australia. He's an amazing guy. But
he's a wheat farmer also?
Correct.
Yeah.
But basically, the returns that he's starting to see is really good and positive for him as a farmer. He's actually making money. Mm-hmm. One of the things is farmers are addicted to fertilizers, to chemicals, to GM crops.
Yeah.
Everybody tells us, all the big multinationals, they tell the farmers, this is what you need to be successful.
Right.
Absolute BS.
Yeah. You want to increase the productivity of your field, use this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But when you use chemicals to kill off the weeds, you're also killing off all the beautiful everything in the soil.
The soil nutrients.
Soil nutrients, exactly. So when you do that, the soil becomes dead.
Yeah.
And it's so important. If you want good food, it needs to thrive. It needs to feed. It needs to eat off something, not just fertilizers. And a lot of our fertilizers, people don't realize, they're actually, a lot of them comes from oil-based petroleum as well.
Yeah. Well, and of course we all know Monsanto and their famous Roundup product, and pretty much forced a lot of, I know, American farmers, Australian farmers, and wheat farmers especially, to use that in terms of finishing up their crops and keeping weeds out of the crop.
Yeah, it's called Roundup. It's one of the most widely most commonly used chemical products. One of the downsides with that as well, the more chemicals you use as a farmer, the more resistance your weeds will get.
Right. They adapt.
Exactly, they adapt. They're not, plants aren't stupid. So, people think they are, but
no, they've been around a while.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So all those, the more chemicals we use, the more fertilizers we use, it doesn't do us any good.
Yeah.
If we go back to natural ingredients, people don't get food allergies like they do with chemical foods. They get to eat food as it really should be, which is at its basic natural.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's that end of things, and then I'm also involved with a group called Pachamama Alliance, and they tackle things from that issue as well. They're very big in the Amazon rainforest in South America, protecting that rainforest, which you might think of as the lungs of our planet. And there's a rainforest here in Malaysia as well. And what they also do is talk about what you can do as a person with some of these issues.
So what can you do?
Well, one thing is eliminate food waste. There's a lot of food waste on every end, but what you can do as a person is, when you go to that all-you-can-eat buffet, take what you eat and nothing more.
Right.
Don't load up your plate, eat 3 bites and go, I'm full. And the other thing is, when you're making dinner, just prepare what you know you can finish. You can always make something else.
Yeah.
But if you overproduce and have to throw it away, that's just literally food into the garbage can.
And there's a lot of people that refuse to eat leftovers.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Right.
Leftovers is fantastic.
Eat leftovers. Yeah. Another one.
Even mix it in with something you're cooking for the next day.
Yeah. And another one is just empowerment of women. There's a lot of women that don't have choice when it comes to family planning, and we don't need any more mouths to feed on this planet, really. I'm not saying stop having babies. I'm saying have babies responsibly. Have the babies you can feed. And the reason that doesn't happen a lot of times is because women aren't given full charge of their own bodies and their own choice and their own ability to plan for a family. So that's another one. So there's 2 things that people can do, and then just being responsible for your own stuff. We're in a consumptive society, and we've been sold a bill of goods, really, about what it is to be happy. And what we think it is to be happy is to get more stuff. I would just challenge us all to think about, do you really need that next iPhone? Do you really need a new car this year? Do you really need that Gucci handbag, the 9th in your collection? Can you get along with 8?
Exactly, because at the end of the day, when you drop dead, it's just stuff.
None of that stuff's coming with you.
Exactly.
No.
So enjoy the fruits of life.
Yeah.
And that sample food.
And that consumptive lifestyle from us all, that pays the planet's paying a toll for that. That stuff doesn't just get printed in a 3D printer somewhere. It comes from the earth. A few years back, we actually surpassed the point that the earth can regenerate itself to feed, house, clothe, and have the resources necessary for everybody. It's now at about 1.5 times. And the U.S., I think, is about uses 5 times what it needs to just sustain itself.
Correct.
And some countries, like some third world countries, are a little bit under. If we just, first of all, evened all of that out, and secondly, just paid more attention, just a little bit more attention. I'm not saying go live as a pauper with just clothes on your back that you can carry.
Yeah.
We can all live comfortable lifestyles without having to rape and pillage this planet like we are.
Oh, exactly. It's living sustainably and living and trying to find the foods that are good for you, not the stuff that has additives and all the other rubbish and everything else.
Yeah.
Eat natural foods,
organic
foods, and even create simpler meals. So you don't have to use 20 or 30 ingredients to create a meal. Just containers, so you can actually taste each individual ingredient.
I like
as
that.
Well. So some of the people that we're going to look at in
coming up in the future,
coming up in the podcast. So I'm going to we're going to hopefully get an interview with Chef Lino.
Chef Lino, tell me about Chef Lino.
So he's actually Sicilian. He has a restaurant called Gatapado, which is in Singapore.
Wow. Italian restaurant?
It is. Wow. Italian seafood specifically.
Interesting.
Just
sounds
amazing.
Great. Yeah.
He had he recently got some marron from me, and he sold out in 2.5 days.
Oh, good.
Which is incredible.
Great news.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right. And he's putting them back on the menu.
Right on.
Next week or a week or two.
Good for your business.
Yeah, for sure. And then we've also got. Hopefully, we'll get in lined up my truffle supplier, so people will get to hear about truffles, why they're so expensive. Why they're so important to cuisine, like particularly French cuisine as well.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of people that we've got lined up. We've got a few other people in the pipe.
Yeah, and I think we're going to try to talk to Dimi and Katya from Organic Burst, who run a wholesale, actually direct-to-consumer supply of premium, exclusive, organic, and speaking of non-GMO products like matcha and other sort of superfoods, is what they call them. And Rochelle, my partner, and I just kind of bumped into them in Singapore and struck up a conversation and just was blown away by what they had to say about what they're doing. And then top 10 chefs of Singapore, we're kind of working our way down the list, inviting them each on the show.
We're also going to branch out a bit. I've got some pretty good contacts back in Australia, so some chefs in Australia.
Good.
So we'll get in touch with those as well.
Good. And then we have Alika. She runs Kitchen by Food Rebel.
Right.
And she is not only organic, gluten-free proponent and runs a very clean kitchen in Singapore, but also is a personal health coach and trainer, and I think she'll have a lot to add to our listeners' breadth of knowledge.
Particularly with training, or being able to exercise and include that in your diet, that'd be a great podcast to get onto.
Okay, then I think that'll do it.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks for everyone listening on today's podcast. Yeah. We hope to bring you a new one next week.
Yeah, we'll have some great guests coming up, as we talked about, and for now, have a great day. We'll get out of the rain real quick here. Here it comes.
Au revoir from Ian Nenke and my co-host, Todd Lennox.
Take care.
If you're enjoying the Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast, please consider supporting us by going to our homepage at www.finefoodandhealthylivingasia.com and making a donation.
We are beginning a new way to support the show by subscribing as a loyal member. Another option on our homepage at finefoodandhealthylivingasia.com. There are options to choose for the level of support you wish to give.
We will always make our podcasts available for free and appreciate your patronage to be able to do so.
If you subscribe with iTunes, please remember to give us a 5-star rating. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so and then give us a 5-star rating. For other subscribers on Google Play, Spotify, or any other aggregators, please rate us there. Once again, thank you for listening to the show.